Alright, hey guys, this is Yoda. Recently, Wowhead posted some data mine changes to Theater of Pain that Blizzard is planning to introduce into Season 2. There is an overall theme where it's an increased cast time on dangerous casts that affect the whole group, and a decreased cast time on tank busters. So I think increased cast times on the casts that affect the whole group is going to be nice, but a decreased cast time on tank busters is not good. So the main reason I think this is that we'll go over the first one, increased cast on dangerous casts that affect the whole group. So for experienced players, in my opinion, this increased cast time on the unCCable mobs, such as this Raging Bloodhorn's Raging Tantrum, is not really going to change much because, an experienced player running this dungeon that is healing is going to know exactly when the tantrum damage is hitting. Like, they're not really looking at the cast time. They're going to be looking at a cooldown tracker, or just know from running the dungeon so many times when the Raging Tantrum damage happens, so they're not going to be caught off guard by these casts. They're going to have healing prepped, whatever the cast time is. The cast time could literally be instant, they would still have healing prepped, right? But what this actually affects is newer players who are running the dungeon, maybe for the first time, or learning it, or just doing their weekly key. Those healers may not have these cooldown trackers. They may not care to prepare healing for something that is not like readily apparent on their screen. So these cast time increases are going to alert these healers, in my opinion, or other players that they may be taking damage soon and they need to do something about it. So in my opinion, that's a good change. So the decreased cast time on tank busters, on the other hand, in my opinion, is bad for the opposite reason. So just to reiterate, the same thing applied to these casts. Any experienced player, or most experienced players that are running these dungeons over and over again, trying to gain score, Mythic Plus, or whatever, are going to be playing with a cooldown tracking weak aura, or at least just know from running the dungeon many times over when these tank busters are happening. They're going to know, ooh, 2 seconds into combat, I'm going to push Ardent. 12 seconds in, it's Bubble, etc. The tank busters could literally have no cast time, and as long as you have a cooldown tracker, it wouldn't matter. You could still cooldown the tank buster. So this decreasing the cast time on tank busters is not punishing these people. It is punishing the newer players who are playing the dungeon maybe for the first time, or again doing weeklies, or maybe learning the class they're playing. Basically, the cast time of this tank buster is how much time those newer players have to react or figure out what they're going to do to survive. Decreasing this is going to cause those newer players or learning players to just die more. And, we already have massive issues with tanks dying way too much in dungeons. So I really hope they revert this and instead actually go in the opposite direction. One other note about this dangerous cast which affect the whole group. So on the unCCable mobs, we already mentioned it's a good change because it lets people prep healing. It's actually an even better change, in my opinion, for the mobs that are vulnerable to CC. So for mobs that are vulnerable to CC, for instance, later on, I believe we talk about this mob. Yeah, Maniacal Soulbiter's Necrotic Bolt Volley cast time increased 3.8. Right now, in War Within Season 1, we had a problem at the start of the season where they reworked how AoE stops interact with casts. In Dragonflight, AoE stops would put the cast on cooldown, so if you AoE stop something, it was basically the same as if you kicked it. Going into War Within, they changed that, so if you AoE stop something, it just instant starts casting again, it does not go on cooldown. In my opinion, this change was at least a little bit necessary, because in Dragonflight, if you had a Druid and a Mage in your group, between Typhoon, Incap Roar, BB, and Blast Wave, which are all 30-second cooldowns, they could basically keep the whole pack CC just with those two classes. You didn't even need the OP VDH or other classes to help with AoE stops. Just those two people could almost keep the pack CC'd by themselves, which I think was a problem. That was a little bit too OP. So the change they did, for better or for worse, made the keys way, way harder. Now there is a massive issue in pugs where people are using AoE CCs that are overlapping with kicks, and your kick is on cooldown, but the enemy spell is not, so you're just eating the next cast because you're overlapped. So if they increase the cast time of these casts, then it is way less likely that people are overlapping, kicks with AoE stops, because if you use an AoE stop, you should be using it late in the cast, and if you kick, you can basically just kick whenever. So for instance, this Necrotic Bolt Volley was 2.8 seconds. So before, you would see it casting and you'd barely have time to react and be like, oh shit, I need to stop that, and you'd push an AoE stop and someone else would kick, GG. Right, but with a 3.8 second cast time, hopefully, people are going to kick early in the cast, and then if you AoE stop right when it's about to go off, then it's not going to be as bad, because instead of having 3 seconds to fix this, now you have 4 seconds. So it's a good change, in my opinion. Hopefully they apply it to many more casts as a general theme. We also have a few numbers adjustments. I wouldn't look too deep into these because Theater of Pain has gone through like, 2 expansions worth of scaling, which may have messed everything up. No one that doesn't work at Blizzard has actually tested these dungeons, so maybe these changes actually needed to happen for these skills to feel impactful at all. So I wouldn't read too much into this. We'll see how it actually plays out, when we play on the PTR in a week or so. Also, there's one other thing they did to Tank Busters. So this is also a generic theme that has been happening in War Within. Pretty much every Tank Buster in the game is not outrangeable anymore. The cast time reduced, we already talked about why that's bad, but now they're also increasing the range to 100 yards. Obviously, this is going to cause tanks to die more, but personally, I think this is probably a good design choice because, Heaving the Breaker's entire purpose in life is to cast Colossus Smash on the tank. If, your tank can just take 2 steps out of melee, and then this guy's, purpose in life is over, then that's probably not good game design. In my opinion, this cast time should probably be increased. Maybe look at how much it does. Maybe not 50% increased physical damage because that's a ridiculous number. But if they want every single one guaranteed to hit, then that is fine. I don't mind that because this is the only skill this guy does. Same thing with Unbalancing Blow. This is kind of like a ridiculous skill also, and in my opinion, it should have an increased cast time. And I think this is not outrangeable, but we'll have to test this when we get to the PTR. If it is outrangeable, I'm sure they'll make it not outrangeable. Same thing with Devour Flesh. They basically are making it so you can't outrange this, since the area where this mob appears in is usually kind of cramped, so you're not going to be able to go more than 40 yards generally. I honestly don't mind this because having a cooldown rotation for these skills is kind of important, and if you could just backstep it by taking 1 leap out, in my opinion, is a little bit too easy. So hopefully they just, in exchange for doing this, they just make the Tank Buster hit a little bit less hard, or hopefully it's not just one-shotting tanks, as the Tank Busters kind of are on live. We'll see what they do. Surely, Blizzard doesn't have 2 seasons in a row where tanks are just permanently on the floor. Hopefully they actually listen to feedback. Hopefully they listen to my feedback about the Tank Busters in this post. We'll see what happens when we test on the PTR in a week. On top of this, a couple of boss fights have been reworked. So the first boss fight was reworked. I don't know if you guys played Shadowlands, but basically the way it worked in Shadowlands is you would focus down Desia. There's 3 mobs in this pull. There's 2 casters, and those casters basically just don't do anything. They just bolt, and as long as you kick every bolt, their casters might as well not be in the encounter. And then there's Desia, who was the main enemy, who was perma doing massive damage to your tank, applying Mortal Strike to your tank, and also would fixate people, and that fixate was basically a guaranteed death unless you had a soothe or that person had shadow meld or feign death. So it looks like they're kind of reworking this. They're making it so that Enrage can no longer be soothed, which is, surely they at least changed the name, right? Enrage is no longer Enrage, LOL. And they're also adding a bunch of group damage to all of the mobs, so your whole group's gonna be getting pounded the whole time. Well, maybe not the whole time. At different points in the fight, there will be massive healer checks. On top of that, Mortal Strike has also had its cast time reduced, just like every other Tank Buster. I'm not sure why they hate tanks, but it is what it is. So this boss has been kind of reworked. Also, before, you would just focus down Desia because it was the only dangerous mob, but now they added Final Will, so if you focus one down, then the other 2 start going crazy, so that's probably not going to be the right strategy. I'm not sure what the correct strategy is actually going to be. It's probably because before, when Desia enraged, basically you just had to kite the whole time if she was on you, so surely you're not kiting for the next 30 seconds or something. We'll see how it goes. Zav didn't get much changes. Gore Chop, this is not a real change. No one cares about this. Kul'tharok seems like it's been completely reworked. So before, Kul'tharok was not that hard of a fight. Basically, you would have 2 damage events, which was the Dispel, and you would also have the Draw Soul. And the only time it was scary was when they overlapped, so you just use your personal there and call it a day. It looks like the fight has been completely reworked. So it'll be more interesting now. Before it was very hard, but that's because the numbers were difficult. Now there's it's a more complicated boss fight, I guess. So hopefully there's more room to make this fight a little bit easier numbers wise. We'll see. And that is it for what has been released on Theater of Pain. I'm super excited to be testing this on the PTR when it comes out in a week. Be sure to catch those streams. Thank you all for watching. Peace out.